Been thinking a lot about grades as of late. And, a lot of my perspective is not only what I see with my own two kids, but all the coaching days that I've been spending in schools. And when I go in to coach and work with administrators and teachers, I try to make it black or white. I try to look at those elements that it's there or it's not. And one of the things is, are kids thinking? How are they applying their thinking? Are all kids' learning needs being addressed? Are they applying their learning in relevant and meaningful ways? But the one thing I look at is assessment. As a principal, I collected assessments instead of lesson plans because we wanted to work, from the end goal, from backwards, and work away from there. And I'll tell you right now, many assessments lead to a grade. But does a grade really reflect learning? And that's something that I think as educators, we need to challenge. We need to challenge that's the way we've always done it. That's the status quo with grades. Now, I'm not saying get rid of grades. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what does a grade mean? The great grade illusion is that a grade signifies learning. It doesn't if kids are just arbitrarily given points, and it's called a rubric. If a rubric doesn't have clear, definitive guidelines, success criteria that show a student's progress towards a standard or a concept. We're made to think that learning is linear. And you go from point A to point B, and a grade tells you how well you've done. And that's what kids think. And what's even more concerning is that's what parents think. Parents, will look at a grade and attribute that to success. None of us have gone from point A to point B. Learning is not linear. Success is not linear. It's a convoluted process. But when we think about grades, it's sort of unfair how we sometimes determine the grade and slap it on kids and say, hey, you know what, you've done well. When we think about success, it really is what people see. And what learning looks like, people see it through a grade, through a score, through a mark. But when we think about what it actually means per se, is what is it that we don't see? What are those things that really go into making up a grade? So let's look at a student that does well on a traditional assessment, and they get a good grade, and they get an A. But let's say a student who struggles with traditional methodologies doesn't get an A. They get a C or they get a D, and that's how they're determined. Well, when we think about the great grade illusion, look at our trades. I look at like auto mechanics. I look at plumbers. I look at those and I'm so envious of them because I wish I could think like that. It's not that I can't. I was never trained to think like that. And the great grade illusion is those students might struggle based on a one-size-fits-all approach, based on knowledge and recall, or elements that just don't really relate, that are not relevant to them. And when they get a poor grade, they are made to think sometimes that as students that they're not smart, that they are not going to be successful. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. As I meander around this topic and I try to gather my thoughts, we have to really take a hard look at how we assess our students. And do we provide alternative means of assessment? Do we give kids choice in the type of activities they want to engage in? Do we give them choice as to how they will show us what they know, what they can do, and that they've learned? So as I, just keep thinking about this and we think about the grades, it is often an illusion. Now, I'm not saying kids that get good grades are not smart. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a grade often does not depict the learning that really means something to our kids, the learning that's lasting, the learning that's going to help them be successful, the learning that's going to help prepare them not for something, but for anything. And if I could, encourage everyone, again, not saying throughout assessment, I'm not saying get rid of testing. I'm saying let's look at all the different dynamics that go into a grade, and let's make sure that we are clear and we understand what does it actually mean. But more importantly, does it mean something to our kids? And is it going to provide them meaningful feedback that's going to help them be successful as they leave our classrooms and our schools. Thanks for listening, everybody.